Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. I am Ethan Nash here with you today, and also with you today, we have back on the show a frequent flyer on the podcast, Dr. Anna Gibson, the terrific and wonderful and mysterious Anna Gibson.
Very mysterious, full of mystique. I am. I'm more of an open book, but I can try to be mysterious, Ethan. We can keep things a little hidden if we need to.
That's true. You
Weird.
are kind of more of an open book. I don't know why I said mysterious. It just sounded like a really cool way to intro.
No, I feel very complimented. I aim to be mysterious, so I'll see if I can keep it going.
Well, we'll see what happens. Well, Anna, welcome back to the show. Again, she's been on the episode or on the show several times before, and Dr. Gibson is a colleague of ours at Nash Consulting. She also has her own consultancy, Gibson Dynamics. Anna, just maybe say a little bit about Gibson Dynamics and kind of what you're doing in that walk of life.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. So, in the work that I do, I think a lot about employee well-being. So, really bringing more of that like health psychology lens and organizational health lens into the work that I do, and thinking about like how do you help systems support the well-being of as many people as possible. And a lot of the time, that does come back to good leadership practices and good and healthy team practices. But really, I think about it from like how do you help people have the healthiest relationships possible? And how does that support an environment where people can also be healthy in the rest of their lives?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Very cool. I love that. I love the work you do. I love the way you think about organizations and just, your heart for people and individuals within organizations. And
thanks.
we're just, I'm just honored to have you partner with us at Nash Consulting. You do awesome work.
Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah. So Anna was recently on the podcast. She was with me for episode 133 called Making Your Team Work Better with Anna Gibson. We'll link to that episode in the show notes. And this conversation is a follow-up on that episode. Um, I would encourage our listeners, if you haven't already, to go back and listen to that episode first, although it might not totally be necessary for you to still get some good stuff out of this episode. Again, that's episode 133. Um, Anna, if you don't mind, would you maybe start by kind of reviewing with me and with the listeners here the different kind of distinctions of teams? Like when, teams come in all different flavors. And I know that you've been kind of studying a model that helps us look at how teams are different and unique and some of those differentiators. So, do you mind kind of jumping into that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I'll just do kind of a quick review here. And I know at the end of our last recording, we kind of breezed through the final three C's too. So hopefully we can dig into those a little bit more today. But yeah, so this is a model that comes out of Dr. Eduardo Salas's work, many, many years doing research on the effectiveness of teams, and also his counterpart, Dr. Tannenbaum, and the two of them together wrote this book called Teams That Work. And it's a really interesting model in terms of what drives team effectiveness. And what they say is that if you can understand kind of what makes your team unique, you can figure out kind of which of the research-based drivers to focus on to really improve your team's performance. So the
Mm.
first piece is understanding like what does make your team unique, right? And what they say is that there are kind of five differentiators that make teams different from one another. And that first one is how reliant the team is on each other. So, how much do I actually rely on another team member and the work that they do to be able to do my work or to help the team be successful overall? So, basically, like how interdependent is our work on one another? And then there's how stable our team is. How stable is our team membership? So, do we have people who've been on the team for 10 years, or do we have kind of a rotating, list of cast members who are coming in, coming out, and kind of the team's composition is constantly shifting? Then you've got how consistent the team's tasks are. So, like, do we do roughly the same thing every day? Are we on kind of a similar rotation of tasks? Maybe we have a project that has the same series of tasks over the course of it, but we wrap up one project and then we do another one. But generally, we kind of use a consistent approach. Or do we have to do different things every time we start a new project? Do we have to throw kind of different skills at it, different approaches? Do we have to adapt on the fly, or do we keep things kind of consistent? Then you've got the proximity of team members. So, roughly, like, are we in the same physical location as one another? Or, say, are we dispersed across the globe? And do we work remotely? And then lastly, you've got similarity. So, how similar is the team's expertise to one another? Do people roughly have the same sets of skills, or do you have different subject matter experts in various fields?
Mm.
So, and that can influence kind of the degree of specialty that the team might have, or what the focus of their work ultimately might actually be. Like, do you have a more heterogeneous skill set, or is it roughly kind of a homogeneous group of skills?
I
So
see.
those are the five differentiators. And what the way that you can start thinking about this is, okay, where does my particular team fall on each of those differentiators? And I think, Ethan, we were starting to take our team a little bit last time as we were looking through this model, but if we were to go through each of the five for the Nash Consulting team,
Mhm.
you can argue we are a team of consultants because we all interact with each other in some way, at least to some degree, some of us more than others.
Mhm.
But we all generally share a sense of overlapping purpose and goals, and we're generally viewed as a unit. So we can kind of consider the Nash team to be a Nash team and
Mhm.
not just like a group, say, like a group of people who happen to kind of come together. We're a group of people who actually work with one another. So that's what would make us a team.
Okay.
Let me
Okay.
shut up for a second. I've been talking a lot. What thoughts do
No,
you
this
have
is
about
this
all of
is
that?
great. No, it's great. I want you to shut up less, actually. No, it makes sense. I mean, so first off, it's just when we're looking at our group, we have to determine, hey, is it actually a team? Because if it's not really a team, this what we're talking about here doesn't necessarily apply, right? A book club is a group that gets together every, Monday evening, and you know, but they're not a team. They're not reliant on each other for producing an outcome necessarily. Is that
That's a
fair?
great way of looking at it. Yeah, what distinguishes a group from a team can be how reliant the group is on one another or not. So in a book club, like, yeah, sure, you're sort of reliant on each other to kind of show up to the same place, but that's really about it. You're not actually relying on somebody else to read the book so that you can do something. I mean, I guess you can make an argument for it.
Like if I'm the only one that read the book at the book club, then we just have a wine club at that point. It's not a book club.
You're a one-person wine book club, yes.
Right, right.
Yeah, and then the purpose or the goals of the group is partly what differentiates it too. So yeah, to your point, a book club might not really be a team, but we can consider people with similar goals and who are reliant on one another as a team.
Great. And so, assuming that we've checked that box that we are on a team, and I would imagine the majority of our listeners out there will be on an actual team, in some form or fashion. And then you have these kind of five uniques that we're looking at. So how reliant are we with on each other? How stable is our membership? How consistent are our tasks with each other? What's our proximity to each other, like actual location, and kind of what is our skill set similarity? And
Hmm.
so, understanding these five, like what's the practicality of them for a team? How does a team kind of take these five to improve or understand their team better?
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for asking that. So right, once you understand where you fall on each of those differentiators, then we can start to think about what might that mean for which of the seven C's that we want to focus on. So this was the thing that we dug into more in our first episode on this. But I'll just do a super quick review of the seven C's. And then what we can do is look at each of those differentiators and think about like, okay, what might that mean for which of the seven C's really matter and what might it mean for which matter a little bit less or maybe don't need as much of our focus.
I see. Just to frame it kind of in advance. So, like, for example, if I'm a team that, hey, we're very reliant on each other, right? We're very interdependent, but our membership isn't very stable, our tasks aren't very consistent. Depending, given that profile of your team, we're going to want to focus on certain elements of, or certain certain ones of the seven C's, because
You
that's
got
going to be kind of our biggest bang for a buck for being an effective team. Is that
you
a
got
fair
it.
statement?
You got it. Yeah. So maybe we should start with that first and then jump into the seven C's, Ethan. But so like the Nash team, for example, how reliant are we on one another as a team? And I think we did a little bit of this in episode one. But when I think about the Nash team, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, I think of us as mostly pretty independent from one another, with a few exceptions. Like we've got you and we've got Melissa, who's our amazing director of operations,
Mhm.
and we've got Mike to some degree who comes in and does training and development stuff now. And we've got a couple of little sort of structures emerging other than that, but for the most part, people are doing their work independently and then they kind of come to the hub of you and Melissa and Mike occasionally. So there's more
Yeah.
reliance on the three of you, but then the rest of us are kind of in a bit of a satellite orbit around the three of you. So when I think of our reliance
Yeah.
on one another, it varies a little bit. But when two consultants are working with one another, for example, there might be more reliance on a particular project. So, yeah, what I would say is for a team that isn't super dependent on one another, you the kinds of things that might be important to focus on would be less of the tasky stuff because you've generally got people who are kind of doing what they need to do. But what becomes more important is an understanding of like what everybody else around you is doing and how cohesive we actually are. So for team members who aren't reliant on one another, I would say we might be focusing less on capabilities, right? We're not focusing as much on developing skill sets with one another, but we're probably focusing a good bit on cooperation.
Mm.
So like I need to be able to trust that for the stuff that I don't do, but Melissa does, that once it's off of my plate and in her hands, she's got it, right? We don't overlap in that work, but I trust that she's doing what she needs to be doing and I'm doing what I need to be doing. And that helps us both be more successful. So
Totally.
thinking about how team cohesion would be more important for us from that perspective than it would be like developing specific skill sets. How's
Hmm.
that landing?
Yeah, that makes sense. You have to, for example, trust that when you show up to, your client's site, that there was work that was done by, again, we'll use Melissa as an example because she does so much. Melissa in advance, right? She's figured out where to show up. She's put the stuff in the calendar invite. She's got the materials to the client that you've needed. And you're also having to communicate with her prior to that. Here's the materials that I'm going to need for this workshop. And so there, yes, there's a lot of kind of cooperation there. There has to be that trust.
Yep.
And also probably, I can see the level of psychological safety there as well, right? If I kind of initially onboard a client and, maybe I didn't scope it well, I didn't ask the right questions, and you're kind of walking into a bad situation that maybe we shouldn't have been walking into, you got to be able to come back to me and trust that you can say, hey, I think there's some things that were missed that kind of didn't necessarily set me up for success here.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
I see that cooperation being really kind of key there.
I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kind of what is the term I'm looking for? Like jumping by faith, leaps of faith. We do a
Mhm.
lot of leap of faithing in our group. Like there are days where I show up for a training and I'm like, well, hope everything's ready to go. And invariably it is because Melissa is a superstar at her job and I don't have to worry about it, right? But that does hinge on trust. And to your point, psychological safety too, that like if I think it's going to be a bad situation, I got to be able to say, "Ugh, hey, I think we might need to go back to the drawing board and rethink this a little bit."
Yeah.
So for
And
our team,
I'll just say, even as example, like you and I have had kind of what I consider anyways, like plenty of these cooperative, hopefully psychological safety based conversations as of late as
don't
we're
call me difficult. It's
no,
okay,
I'm
Ethan.
no, I'm just thinking about like a lot, there are many client projects that we take on that are complicated, they're nuanced, they're emotional. There's not
Yeah,
one right way
yeah.
to approach them. And me having the initial communication with the client, we're kind of having to push back on each other of like, hey, I don't think that's the right approach, or maybe we should try a different. And so there's a lot of that goes on in order for you to, when you do start with the client, there's some alignment and also a good plan moving forward that we were able to kind of be open with each other about how to approach it.
Yeah, totally. That cooperation with one another helps us be less reliant later on. Being
Yes.
able to trust each other at the beginning helps us go off and do our own separate things.
That's a really good way of thinking about that. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. And then, okay, so that would just be one example of a way to apply reliance to the seven C's, but maybe let's think about membership stability. So for our team, I mean, we've got pretty good retention on our team. I would say, I think, we've got folks who've been there 6 years plus on
Yeah.
our team. So for a team who's super stable, you probably don't need to focus as much on what do you imagine? Maybe cognition, for example, that's the one that's coming to mind. Like we tend to have a pretty roughly good idea of who we are and
Mm.
what we're about. Our kind of shared mental models are pretty similar because we've all kind of been together over the last, 6+ years. Maybe
Yeah.
more so with you and Mike, for example, because you've done this thing together. But for the most part, we all kind of have a general sense of who Nash Consulting is. Is that fair?
Yeah. And our general, again, kind of like philosophies and,
Yeah.
practices for approaching our client work. Yeah. Because you can imagine, hey, if we were a team that, people are kind of rotating in and out, like we're probably pretty consistently having to dial down on cognition because there's kind of new training, getting people up to speed with how we're going to approach things.
Yes.
So yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's interesting. I was just remembering Penny just joined our team in the last
Yeah.
year or so. And it's
Who's been
Penny's
on
an
the podcast a couple times. So yeah.
Yeah, and she's an interesting case because she's our first non-local team member. So we're navigating some transitions around just like distributed team from local versus national. And as we've onboarded her into the group, right, part of what she's trying to figure out is who this team is. So collectively, we may not be focusing a ton on cognitions, but we are thinking about like how do we coordinate now with Penny and how do we kind of bring her into the fold? So we might be focusing a little bit more on coordination with her or maybe communication with her, but less so on the actual cognitions.
Yep. Okay. I'm following you. This is great.
Cool. Yeah, it's fun, right? Just kind of look
Yeah.
at it with a different lens. And then let's see, task consistency. So for the most part, again, we've got, our Nash team, we've got a bunch of consultants who roughly do kind of similar things. And
Mhm.
then we've got you and Melissa who are, and Mike now, who are kind of outliers in the tasks. Not everybody does the tasks that the three of you do. So
Yeah.
for the most part, task consistency. So what do you think, Ethan, might that mean for which of the C's would be important for us to focus on? I know I'm putting you on the spot here. Putting
Yeah.
my professor on the spot.
That's good because it's actually, I mean, this is kind of like a real-time coaching session for me to think through
Woo!
this. So you're right, tasks are pretty consistent across the board. I mean, even with me, I still share a lot of tasks with the broader consultancy team. And then of course I have
Mhm.
my own specific tasks. Um, I maybe this is a little bit out in left field, but this is where my brain goes. But I kind of think that that's like an opportunity to really dial up the coaching element of it. And the reason why I'm thinking that is because we, especially as a consultant team, share very similar tasks. That means we all have very similar experiences at some level with the work. And there's a
Mm,
lot of opportunity then for the consultants to, um, spark learning with each other. Like I'm
mhm.
thinking about some of our team meetings. We have our kind of group learning sessions where we're just sharing kind of, hey, what's going on with the client and helping each other work through that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
coaching, which wouldn't maybe work as well if we all had very, very different tasks. We might not be
Mhm.
able to really coach each other in the same way because we don't have the same context.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, you might focus more on capabilities if the
Mm.
tasks were all different, like developing skill sets, but in terms of coaching and leading and mentoring one another, maybe a little bit
Mhm.
less so there. Like we can all be leaders to one another in our context, kind of because the tasks are so consistent. Am I
Yeah.
hearing that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And of course, it can
Cool.
go both ways, right? A group, I can imagine a group that all has very dissimilar tasks in a sense. There could also be a benefit for coaching because we're coming from different angles and different experiences. But I think you'll just have to find the opportunities for coaching might be a little bit more tricky to make sure that, we can actually speak into some of those stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, dig it. I would totally agree. Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And then let's see, we have proximity, and I was just kind of touching on this with Penny a second ago,
Mm.
but for the most part, so we've got an interesting distribution here. We are all, other than Penny, local to the Washington area, but we're all spread out over Washington. So it's not like we come into a central office and we all hang out together. Although we're trying some new things there, which we'll
Right.
see how that goes. It'll be an
That's right.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so we've got people who are fully distributed. What might that mean for challenges we might have in the seven C's?
Hmm. Yeah. I would think that. I mean, it could lead to some challenges in the area of coaching just there's because of the proximity, there's just less kind of organic run-ins with each other in the break room or around the coffee machine or whatever, right? So we have to be more intentional about setting up maybe opportunities, or as individuals, you have to be more intentional about reaching out for coaching and stuff like that. So I could
Yeah,
see that. I could also see challenges with communication in general. Anytime you have a distributed team, you just have to be more intentional, take extra steps about
100%.
communication. And so
100%.
much great communication can happen when you're all in the same place. So you have to set up other systems so the communication happens. So those are the ones that come to mind for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean that's why we've now got, post COVID,
Hmm.
so many communication tools popped up all of a sudden to help distributed teams stay in better communication with one another because you can't rely on face-to-face interactions or bumping into one another in the hallway in the same way you could, pre-COVID when everybody was together. And obviously that's shifted quite a bit now, but communication gets much more challenging the further away from people you are. So having really intentional methods of communication can really help. I would totally agree with that.
Okay.
And then lastly, we've got similarities. So Nash team, we've got roughly similar kinds of expertise. And I think, what you were saying about coaching earlier, Ethan, when comes to task consistency, that's, I think, would apply here as well.
Actually,
And
probably better. Yeah. Now, when
yeah.
I was thinking about the coaching one, I was probably thinking more about similar skill set, tasks too, but the skill
Mhm.
set is probably what leads to the So, anyways, I interrupted, but yeah.
No, 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 no. You were thinking exactly what I was thinking too. So coaching would definitely apply to how similar people's expertise is because we've got some, more junior members of the team and then some with a lot more experience and a lot of coaching opportunity comes there. It also applies for task consistency. For task consistency, I might also think that focusing on coordination might be helpful if tasks aren't consistent, right? The more consistent your tasks are, the less intentional need there is to focus on like how are we staying coordinated through our tasks. But the
Mm.
more that they're the more different the more different they are. I think that's
That
grammatically correct,
works. I
right?
think
The more
that's,
different they
I
are.
think that's English.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, the more you might want to focus on it. So, because our expertise and because our tasks are fairly similar, we probably don't need to spend a ton of time on coordination. But because we're distributed from one another, we probably want to spend more time on communication.
Mm.
And because of our reliance and our membership stability, we also probably want to be focusing on cooperation too. Like trust and cohesion of our team is what helps make us really successful.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Would it be worth it maybe to take kind of a different type of team and maybe touch on a few of these with that type of teams, just so we can have a different example? So, what would be a
Yeah,
fun team to do that with? I'll let you choose your adventure.
choose your own adventure. Man, those books were great.
Those were.
Um, yeah, so what if we do a lot of work with hospitals in,
Mhm.
Nash, and we work with nursing teams quite a bit. So maybe we can take a nursing team and think about a hospital setting. That's
Ooh,
actually where a lot of the psychological safety research
yeah,
was done too by Amy Edmondson. So it could be a nice
right.
example to use.
Yeah, let's do that. That'd be great.
Cool. Okay, so for something that makes hospital teams unique is the stakes, right? There's such high stakes in hospital settings, emergency settings, things like that, because there are lives on the line, right? So a lot of when we're thinking about a nursing team, that's a lot of what will help, what we'll want to think about in terms of what makes them unique.
Mm.
So if I were to just quickly go through the five distinction criteria here for a nursing team, they're highly reliant on one another, right? For coverage, they need second checks. There are critical decisions being made. Uh, the stability of the team is generally pretty good, although if you've got high rates of burnout, you might actually have less stability on a team, which would come with some other challenges. But for the most part, you've got teams who are kind of working together pretty consistently, and the membership of it stays stable. Is that fair? Is that how you
Yeah,
think about that?
I think that's generally fair. And depending on kind of the size of the hospital or what's going on, there is often like rotating nurses, or they bring in traveling nurses that are there just
Great point.
temporarily. So there is some of that. So I'd probably put stability not right in the middle, a little bit kind of a little bit more stable, but
A little more stable. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd agree. And then task consistency is pretty routine other than for emergency, right? Or like the severity of a patient's experience probably would differentiate what kinds of tasks are being done. But for the most part, there are rounds, there I assume, going and checking each of the patients, going through their standard protocols, whatever it might be. Generally, the tasks are consistent, so maybe moderately so.
yeah.
They're super close to one another, right? You've actually got to be in the same location, and their skill sets are pretty similar, unless you start adding in, like a full care team where you've also got doctors and, yeah, doctors, nurses, maybe some specialty like physical therapy specialists. Their skill sets might be different, but for the
Mm.
most part, for a nursing team specifically, their skill sets are going to be really similar, and so that's high.
Okay.
So we've got a team that's highly reliant on one another. Their team membership is pretty stable. Their tasks are pretty consistent. They are in the same place, and their skill sets are pretty similar.
So it seems
So,
like for all of the uniques, they're pretty high on all of them.
yeah,
Just
pretty high, pretty high. And maybe, yeah, I mean, maybe stability and consistency of tasks is maybe where they're
Mhm.
slipping down a little bit. But I would agree. For the most part, we've got kind of an extreme team here that we're
Yeah.
thinking about. So, if we're looking at the seven C's here, capability, cooperation, coordination, communication, cognition, conditions, and coaching,
Mm.
just as at a first glance, where do you think a nursing team, given the kind of team we just talked about, where do you think they would get a big bang from their buck in
Mm.
focusing?
I mean, Cooperation is the one that comes to mind for me. Um, and
Yeah, do it.
yeah, so cooperate. I mean, the reason comes to mind for me because cooperation, again, we're thinking about trust, we're thinking about psychological safety, willingness to help, decision making, conflict resolution, and you had alluded to psychological safety that that's where a lot where Amy Edmondson did her initial kind of research on psychological safety, and maybe just say a little bit about that,
Mhm.
'cause that will help frame this.
Yeah, yeah. Amy Edmondson's research really got kicked off. I think the majority of her psych safety research was done in patient hospital settings or on nursing teams in particular. And what she found was that teams that had a higher degree of psychological safety,
Mm.
so where people feel comfortable speaking up and saying like, hey, I don't think you're supposed to put that needle right there, right? If I don't feel comfortable saying that, it puts people's lives at risk. If I'm noticing something's wrong and I don't say it, there's a higher likelihood that errors could be made, that something might get missed, whatever it might be. So what Amy Edmondson's teams found is that patient outcomes, literally patients' lives, there is an improvement in patient outcomes, the higher psychological safety is. So
Yeah.
I think Ethan, you zoned right in on cooperation here. That's critical for nursing teams, right? My trust in other team members, the support that we provide to one another, our ability to just jump right in and step in if somebody is stepping out, that literally equals survival.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you touched on it there with the last thing you said, like willingness to help as well. Like that's going to be
Yeah.
super critical as things get busy and hectic, stressful. There's burnout. I mean, all sorts of kind of real issues pop up that's going to be, again, I think fundamental to this type of team.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I would also say coordination is going to be super critical for a nursing team. So, an understanding of like, how are we doing warm handoffs with clients? When are people taking their breaks? Do I know, if Joe has gone off to take a cigarette break?
Mhm.
Cigarette break at the hospital. It's not uncommon. It's a very
It is
common
not.
thing.
It's surprisingly uncommon. It's a stressful
Surprisingly,
environment.
it is a stressful environment.
I would be smoking a lot of cigarettes. I'm just
I
saying.
would too. I would too. So Joe goes to take a smoke break, but if I am not, if I assume that Joe's out on the floor and he's going to be able to step in if a patient red lines,
I think that
there's a
sounds,
code. There's a
yeah,
code of some
yeah,
kind. Yeah. There's an emergency code and I think that Joe is going to step in, but I haven't been situationally aware of that or I'm not familiar with our procedures for how to manage when somebody else is on break,
mm,
then that might slip through the cracks there. So I want to make sure that our procedures, our protocols are all in good and clear, efficient coordination. So
yeah,
there's
absolutely.
seamless flow of things.
Yeah, there's also just, I mean, given the little I do know about nursing teams, I mean, there's extreme coordination because one nurse, for example, has a specific task, and then depending on what happens with that task, right, whether they're taking vitals or something like that, they need to be able to coordinate with the next nurse that's going to come in to take care of the next step. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I'm just reiterating what you're saying. I also, if I could just add one here, I would just say maybe, I mean, communication, which again is like, is information exchanged clearly, maybe quickly with closed loops? That
Mhm.
strikes me as really important because you're passing on, literally critical information,
Yeah.
and for that to be passed on accurately, well, and that there's also kind of that closed loop that you understand that person understood what you were saying. Um, that might be one of the more important ones, I would think.
I would totally agree with that. And you can see, I mean, just walking into a hospital, how much of that is embedded into their standard protocols, right? Like even if you're in a hospital room, there will be a whiteboard with like what the doctor's name is, who the nurse is that's currently on staff, what the patient's name is, right? And they do a lot of these checks and double checks to make sure that everybody's kind of working on the same thing. So you can see there that communication and coordination are really closely tied
Yeah.
together. I would agree. And then one that's interesting that's coming to mind for me as being critical or is just something that I see happening a lot in hospital settings is the resources that are available significantly impact burnout levels for nurses, right? Like if hospitals are understaffed,
Mm.
then it creates a squeeze on all of these other areas. So nurses might not necessarily be able to get access to more resources, or like they might not be able to directly influence the headcount that they have. But in lieu of that, if they can't control what they're getting, they can focus on some of these other areas
Mhm.
to try to improve, yeah, to try to improve efficiency, which would ideally help improve burnout as well. I mean, some of this is just the nature of the job and it's challenging, but just wanted to add that kind of conditions layer to it because for nursing in particular, it's pretty impactful.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Let me maybe ask you kind of one more question here. Actually, I got two more questions, and maybe
Oh,
we
Bowie.
wrap up the episode, or we'll just keep going and going. But
I know. We'll be here
uh,
forever.
when I'm thinking about this, a nursing team, and again, we acknowledge that they're decently high on kind of all of the five uniques that we talked about. When I'm now looking at these seven C's and I'm thinking as, a leader of a nursing unit, like, all right, where do I want to really kind of double down on with these seven C's? And then which ones are not that they're not important, but maybe a little bit less of a priority to focus on for a team like
Hmm.
this?
Hmm.
Is there one that kind
Yeah.
of stands out?
Yeah, the one that's kind of standing out to me as maybe a little less important is cognition.
Hmm.
And I only say that, like, it's not that it's not important, right?
Right.
But for the most part, nursing teams already kind of know what they are and what they're about, right? Like it's just fairly obvious that we're here to save people's lives, we're here to make people healthier. And so spending a ton of time with a team helping them figure out like who are we may not be the best investment when you've got these other more critical areas to focus
Right.
on.
I see. Because cognition is, again, it's kind of like a shared mental picture of like what are our priorities, what are our roles, and we're saying that
Yeah.
that's not necessarily complex. Not that it's not difficult, the
Mhm.
work they're doing, but it's pretty understood when you're stepping in as a nurse, right? You're a highly
Yeah.
trained, specialized person already.
Right, right. It's just a little bit more clear than the others are. And so maybe not the first area of focus. Whereas, say, for like a startup team that's just getting going and they don't have any idea really like what are the priorities, or, we're trying to, solve world hunger, but what does that actually look like in practice day to day? They might want to spend a lot of time focusing on cognitions because it's like we don't know who we are yet. We don't know what we're about yet, and we need to start kind of honing that from the
Hmm.
beginning.
Hmm. Heard. I heard you.
Heard.
Yes. Well, so let me end with this. So, if I'm thinking about our listeners out there, I'm thinking about, leaders or managers of teams. Um, do you have maybe kind of a piece of advice or a recommendation in general of how these leaders can kind of take this model and um, what they can do with it to start thinking about how they can improve their teams?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, Ethan. I mean, I think the first thing I would say is that your leadership of a team, you as a leader of a team, have so much influence just in and of yourself
Mm.
over how the team is functioning. So just like working on you first, all of that kind of good self-awareness, self-development stuff is going to have reverberating effects across all of these. across all of them, no matter what. Like if you're focusing on that, there's going to be an effect. But if you want to be really kind of tactical and diagnostic about it, I think what's really cool to do is to actually go through like what we just did and to map out your team on each of the five criteria and then think about like, okay, what might that mean given each of these five for what areas would be important for us to focus on. Like if I'm a leader of a nursing team, for example, and we're struggling with, I don't know, just like procedural problems, I might want to be digging into coordination a little bit more than I am into, skill development, for example. Or maybe it's a lack of skill development that's affecting it. But the point being, if you can actually get this down on paper and go through the exercise, just even as a thought experiment, it might help give you some nuggets about like, oh, I've been spending a lot of time focusing here with my team when actually my investment might be better spent over here a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And offering some team training in that area that you've identified. I have a note here from one of the researchers of this, Salas, just says he kind of notes that team training can explain roughly 20% of the variance in team performance. So,
Mm,
like, meaning it's one of
mm.
the highest leverage investments leader can make. So, I think it's just an understanding of this is almost, I mean, the way I'm looking at it, it's like this is almost like a needs assessment tool for your
Yeah,
team.
yeah. Yeah.
Once you assess it, then we can figure out, okay, then what type of team training can we, do in this area, whether that's, building skills for better cooperation or coordination, coaching skills, which I think to me is the main takeaway here is like, don't just stop at assessing. We don't assess just for the sake of assessing. How many times can I say assessing in one sentence here? But it's about what you're going to do with this that's going to be kind of moving the dials a bit for your team. How does that
Heard,
sound? Heard.
heard.
Very good. Very good. Well, so I'll tell you what, just because I know we're talking about kind of lists of things. We'll link to the book in the show notes. Teams That Work is what
Yep.
it's called. So
Yep.
we'll link to that in the show notes, just so you can get more of a visual representation of what we're talking about here. And yeah, besides that, Anna, anything else you want to say here to our dear audience?
Thanks for having me on, Ethan. And yeah, I mean, leadership is hard, I think is what I'll sum it up with. This is hard work and yeah, it is not for the faint of heart.
It certainly is not. It certainly is not. Well, Anna, this has been awesome. These last couple episodes that we've done together, if not a single one of our listeners listens to these episodes, it won't matter to me because I got a lot out of these. And I have some new ideas as I'm thinking about just our team at Nash. So thanks for
Cool.
helping me think through this. And I'm sure we'll have you on the podcast sometime in the future as well. So thank you.
Love it. Thanks, Ethan.
All right. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Hey, folks, wait. Don't go yet. Please stay with me for 1 second here. I want to let you know about a couple cool little goodies that we have available for you. If you dig this podcast, you will probably also dig our Managing with Mind and Heart newsletter. This is a monthly newsletter where we share articles that we write about, hey, how to thrive as a manager, how to lead teams that are characterized by high morale, engagement, psychological safety, care and respect, collaboration, and high performance. You can sign up for this newsletter by texting the word leading to the number 66866. Additionally, you can go to our website and sign up for the newsletter there. Our website is www.nashconsulting.com. And of course, if you're not already aware, we have our cornerstone program for leaders and managers, and it is called Managing with Mind and Heart. Go figure. This program is something that we often bring into organizations to work with all their leaders on helping them get aligned and singing off the same sheet of music with best practice management skills and behaviors. We've brought this to hundreds of organizations at this point with really good results. And if you are not able or inclined to bring our program in-house, twice a year, in the spring and in the fall, we offer this 6-day Managing with Mind and Heart leadership development program online for anybody that would like to sign up and join us. To learn more about this online course and to register, you can go to our website. Once again, that's nashconsulting.com. Or send us an email at contact@nashconsulting.com. All right, that's all. That's it. See you later. Bye.